Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Heather Margolis. A lot of you know her already. But Heather, if some of our audiences do not know you, I would love to have you introduce yourself. Take
Sure.
a couple of minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always like to say that I'm a recovering channel professional. I worked first in the financial industry and then after business school went into the channel at EMC and moved over to Equalogic, which was very quickly acquired by Dell. And just really learned what I felt was working and wasn't, and how the market was shifting. Like if you remember back in 2008, it was sort of like, but we're EMC, of course they want to do business with us. And then started Channel Maven Consulting in 2009 as both a consultancy and agency. Started a second company, a software company called Spark Your Channel, which I do not suggest starting two companies at once. It is not advisable. And ended up selling both companies to a company called 360 Insights, which is focused on channel incentive management in 2021. Then 6 months ago, with full blessing from my boss and the full executive team, decided that it was time to be an entrepreneur again and rolled the Channel Maven name back out. So now they have the agency. I focus solely on the consulting arm of things and am doing some things a little bit differently, a little bit of coaching, a little bit of curriculum, and just enjoying being an entrepreneur again.
That's an amazing journey. And we'll talk a little bit about it at the end. But let's go back to the last decade from your macro lens. What are
Yeah.
the two or three big changes that you have seen over the years,
Only two
channel?
or three. I mean, how long? We have 4 hours, right? Um,
Right.
so I think the biggest changes as it relates to channel marketing and channel enablement, because that's where my focus is certainly in AI. It's made life much easier, but only if you use it correctly. So you can't just assume that you're going to be able to create something with AI and like set it and forget it and walk away. There still needs to be some human intervention and making sure that the messaging is right, the facts are facts, and then it's still going to sort of hit, if you're, let's say you're creating a piece of content to a customer audience, that it's going to hit the nail on the head as far as what their focus is. I think another one is the shift in the types of partners we work with, specifically in the channel. So when I started working in the channel over 20 years ago, it was, VAR, reseller, and then you had your global systems integrators. But there's so many different types of partners, from MSPs to MSSPs to marketplaces, hyperscalers, like all of the things that have shifted the way that we do business are also shifting the channel. And then I think the third one, um, it's probably the shift from, as I said, when I was at EMC, partners were coming to us and jumping through any hoops that we set for them as far as requirements of the program were concerned, because EMC was the game in town. And now things are very different. And there are a lot of these solutions and options in the mid market. People are doing business very differently. Larry Walsh would talk about the pandemic effect. Like everyone went home and now everyone's not back necessarily. They're starting to come back. And certainly people who want to be in an office are coming back, but it's affected the way that we do business. It's affected the way that we expect to do working hours. Like I know people are working much longer hours, much later hours, but they're going for a hike in the middle of the day. So I think those are the three biggest shifts that I've seen in my 20 something years in the channel.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, we met almost a decade ago through a
Yes.
common customer of ours, and you were doing a lot of demand gen work for them.
Yes.
So, speaking of partners, how do you see demand gen has evolved and where it is today? Where do you think? Because it used to be, you kind of generate leads, hand it over to partners, you run some call blitzes here and there. And then a lot of companies put through channel marketing automation tools in place, then realize partners are kind of resellers, they're not remarketers.
Yeah.
So then agencies like you grew. So where is the state of demand gen today, and what do you think in next 3 to 5 year horizon it's going to
Yeah.
be?
I think, and some of the reason, just taking a step back to the reasons that those things are happening. One, marketing has become much easier overall. So as a small business, it's become more, I won't say easier, it's become more accessible. Like there are more tools out there that these partners now have access to. So they don't depend on a single vendor's through channel marketing automation tool. The through channel marketing automation tools need to get, and many have, more sophisticated in leveraging AI so that the messaging can be much more on point, much more personalized. And it's important to take into account that just because all of these different marketing strategies have come into play, like, 10 years ago, we weren't talking about social ads. We just started talking about AdWords, and we were really heavy on SEO, SEM. Um, Unfortunately, nothing falls off the out of the portfolio, right? When you're like, okay, now we have to do social ads. Now we have to do this. You're not doing SEO. You're still doing it. It just has become like a no-brainer. So I think the shift specifically for the channel is that these partner companies now have more resources at their fingertips. I won't say that they're getting better at doing this, but they now realize that it's important to do it. Some of them are, so especially like if you think of an MSP. MSPs are great at this. They have an agency that's doing all of these things for them. They're getting a ton of inbound leads. It's really a positive experience for them. But I just think there's so many more resources. So partners need even more guidance than they did before. And they really need the resources inside of the channel stack to be more able to work more closely with their infrastructure, as opposed to assuming the partner has nothing. They come in and have everything there, and they have to load their leads and send things out. It now things need to integrate a little bit better with what the partner's using.
So let's build on that a little bit because that's an amazing insight. So if I'm a big brand, like one of the ones that you and I worked together almost 10
Yeah.
years ago, our companies, if I'm going to market today, what do I do? What kind of assets do I give to the partners? What kind of events I fund? What happens to my MDF? What tools should I give them? Can you talk a little bit from a brand perspective? And then maybe you can have some advice for platform provider like us. How should we think the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. Um, it's funny. I was on a call recently and someone said campaign in a box, and I was like, I'm getting itchy. Stop saying campaign in a box. We don't do that anymore. So I really think, especially with AI, the partners probably still need something that's downloadable, or like a webinar that can be registered for. But it needs to be able to be much more heavily customized. And then when it comes to the email that pushes either the invitation to the webinar or the ebook or whatever that downloadable piece of content is, that's where AI comes in. And the email that the partner is creating needs to be much more fluid. It needs to speak to, if they're selling into financial services versus healthcare, the email is very different. Maybe the piece of content is even different. But the ways that partners need more resources now aren't necessarily around the traditional, here's the 4-step email. It's, what does that Instagram ad look like? What does that Facebook ad look like? Are they leveraging LinkedIn ads? What other ad platforms are getting people into them? Are they maybe trying to get some sort of data around how people are acting around certain keywords? So intent data. So I think it's a little bit different from what the partners need. And a lot of the companies that I'm talking to still haven't caught up. Like, we're still doing campaigns in a box. So it just needs to be a little bit more creative and enabling the partners to leverage AI to make it more personalized. Advice to platform companies like yours, I think it is obviously integrating AI, which is a no-brainer. I know you're on the forefront of that. And also look at how the marketing stack, forget channel, take channel out of the equation. Look at how the marketing stack has changed. So when I was SVP of marketing at 360 Insights, we had an intent data platform. something that I never would have thought of 5 or 6 years ago. How can you provide intent data so that the partners know who in the dark web, as we like to call it, know who's asking questions about the solutions that they, or the business outcomes that they provide, or the pain points that they solve. And I always look at consumer products first. When I'm thinking about how is the channel going to evolve, I look at how people are selling to me differently, kind of like clothes. I like vacations. Like, how are those things landing in front of me differently now than they were 5 years ago? And that's where I try to see if the channel is going to follow that strategy, or if it just doesn't fit because it's consumer products versus B2B.
Awesome. So let's build on that framework a little bit. We'll double click on the first part. So if we think about organization or brands, right? The main question, maybe for simplicity's sake, we split it into enterprise and mid market,
Yeah.
right? So if I'm enterprise, I'm possibly blessed with a large, highly likely complex ecosystem. So let's keep that aside for a moment. Let's talk
Mhm.
about mid market, where channel kind of looks like what used to be 20, 30 years ago, to some extent. How do I go to market if I'm trying to recruit onboard partners and then the second phase to enable and drive demand? Let's say I'm a 250, 500,000, maybe even up to 2,500 employee brand.
Yeah. I think I love the mid market. I think it's super exciting. I think you're much more nimble there. So you can like try an initiative with partners, and if it totally flops, as long as you communicated it well. If it flops because they didn't know about it, that's on you. If it flops because they weren't interested, then it's easy to shift. Um, I think the things that are super interesting there right now are giving as much scalable information as possible. So I know these mid market companies don't have budgets like the enterprise and can't provide all the resources that the enterprise does. So then it's about educating the partners, providing them with a one to many resource. Maybe it's a outline of an ebook or some verbiage around a pain point or they're trying to solve for, or business outcome they're trying to attain. Put that somewhere on a platform that partners could very easily access it. Care less about how many leads they're bringing in, care more about how often they're using it. So figure out how to measure just the partner's usage of that information. And then education's huge. Like putting trainings inside your portal that partners can click through whenever they want is vital to ensuring that they're getting their I think as long as they understand that they need to do something, they'll go find resources to help them do that. It just reminds me 10 years ago when we would say like, "Hey, partners, you have to do SEO," and they'd go, "Sorry, how do you spell that?" Because it's just it was something so foreign to them. But when you explain to them that the websites you're finding because they're using SEO in these three places and they're having links in with the same keywords, then the light dawns and they understand why it's important. Same with social ads. Like to so to explain to them that they're getting ads in their Instagram feed or Facebook feed because they said something or they typed something on their phone. Once you explain that and they're like, oh, okay, now I understand why it's important for me to do. So the education to me, it's not teaching the partner how to do it themselves. It's teaching them that it's important and helping them figure out the resources to go get it. Now, when you switch to the enterprise actually does have enough budget where they can do it on behalf of the partners. One mistake I'm seeing enterprise doing is they're shifting a lot of their marketing dollars to the nationals and hyperscalers and GSIs. So these are huge companies, potentially over a billion in revenue, that you're giving money to help market, and certainly it's important so that they're marketing your products alongside your competitors. But what about all of these partners who are potential growth partners? Maybe they're still calling themselves VARs, although it's probably more like solution provider or service provider. Those companies can do a lot more with $10,000 than the larger companies. So just make sure as you're shifting your dollars to the larger strategic partners that you're not taking too much away from those growth partners as well.
Is it because the money is still going to these large partners, which used to be called kind of managed partners? They're still possibly called managed partners. Is it because you think that channel officers are targeted now to demonstrate ROIs? They want more metrics, and they have a few relationships that they can work with to show metrics. And when it comes to a long tail, you really cannot show ROI. Look, what is the reason these large enterprises sticking to a few? While from
Yeah.
a technology wise, right, there are more partners can leverage, as you said, accessible martech stack to drive demand.
So I like when everyone likes me, but I'm going to say something that might make some people not like me. I think there's been this shift in the hierarchy of these larger enterprise organizations, um, that doesn't totally remove a channel chief, but maybe downgrades the channel chief. And now these channel executives are rolling directly up to a chief marketing officer or a CRO. And the CFO has more influence on these people without someone at their peer level to educate them as to why this is bad. So the CFO looks at the dollars and cents and the ROI and says, we make more money through these 5 companies than we do the next 100 companies down. And the CFO is saying to the CMO or the CRO, whoever, or both, we're going to cut budget to this level and we're just going to put more budget into this one because all they're seeing is per partner revenue. Now, if you took those 100 partners and added them all up, they probably bring in more revenue than one of the larger ones. So those partners that are now not getting money from company X are going to go over to company Y where they still have a channel chief in place. They still have somebody advocating at the level of the CFO for that budget to continue.
That's a fascinating insight because little bit orthogonal to this. I was watching a podcast last night on inequality in society. There's a huge aggregation of wealth that's happening. It's kind of fueling further aggregation. And there was one Nobel laureate was talking about, 10% makes multifold of the bottom 50% in most developed countries, and
Yep.
0.1% makes multifold of the top 10%. And what's happening is these luxury brands have double digit, triple digit growth because 0.1% don't consume much. They have to
Yeah.
throw money away, right? So as a result of that, we are seeing these super scalar brands that are becoming global brands. And whether they're yachts or vacations or cruises or perfumes or clothing or, there's an aggregation that's happening. Do you see that's kind of happening in these brands, as we get around these 4 or 5 major marketplaces, and there are a few stars around those planets, and they kind of keep on spending more money to bigger partners, and not much left is for the tail?
I try not to speak about things that I don't feel like I have a deep enough knowledge about, and that's probably one of them. I saw a really great presentation at Bapti Club Next last week that walked through this, and that is definitely what's happening. It's like their own so sun, everything's like pulling toward their planet, and all the moons are surrounding them, and it's just that is for sure happening. A lot of ISVs are trying to align themselves with specific hyperscalers so that as the GSIs come in, they're doing business with an ecosystem. And if they have credits with another ecosystem, then they have to move hyperscalers. They can't do business with that same hyperscaler. So I am seeing this happening. I'm interested to see how it's going to play out and how it's going to affect these much smaller solution providers and service providers. I feel like they are now being seen as you know overhead. Like they're just there, and that they have the direct relationship with the as the trusted advisor with the customer, but that they are being told where to go and what to sell and how to implement.
So let's switch gear a little bit. Let's go back to mid market. I know you
Yeah.
like mid market. So if I'm in mid market, I have 50, 100, $250 million of revenue. My channel's growing, getting more complex. and the team is relatively still small on the channel side, right? Because I may be switching to direct to channel or partner based. I'm trying to get listed in these marketplaces. I'm trying to do all these right things, right? So, what are the recruitment motions for me? Because in the old days, you'd go place an ad on CRN, go to their lunch and learn,
Yeah.
speak to their network and try to recruit partners, or I'll go to a disty. Is that motion still there, or how do I recruit partners in a strategic way? And then what does my enablement phases look like, in that mid market segment?
Yeah. So I do believe the way a lot of this business is getting done, like when we talk about solution providers and service providers, they still like, going out to the bars after channel partners and MSP summit and networking with all of the different technologies. I think that's how you make the first impression. Wait, what these mid-market companies need to think about is what is their value proposition to those partners? Is the sale easier? Is the product more solid so they can absolutely sell it without having any issues? Is it what customers are asking for? Is there brand recognition? So I think it's important that first you make those connections. Probably you used to talk about the virtual watering holes in during COVID when we couldn't go anywhere, everything was virtual. And now we're back to like real watering holes. Like what bars after channel partners are the service providers hanging out at? So I think it's very much building your value proposition to the partners, figuring out how ease of doing business is always one of the very first things that partners say is important to them. It's always in the top three. So what's important? How do you make yourselves easier to do business with? How do you ensure that you differentiate yourself from the other product as far as the partners are concerned? Not just the customers, but like what's in it for the partner? Are they going to make more money? Ease of doing business, what have you? And then be where they are hanging out and gathering information.
So let's kind of take that. So if I'm a mid market company, let's say 100 to $200 million in revenue, right?
Yeah.
And in the old days, I would take 1 to 2% of my top line, call it contra revenue, and spend it in market development funds, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from you is that larger companies are kind of doing that with large GSIs and larger partners and etc. But if I'm in mid market, how do I spend my couple of $1 million? Do I still do MDF, or do I go run events at these watering holes and
Yeah.
hand leads over to partners and then focus on enablement? Like, how do I prime this pump?
Yeah, when you're dealing with less money, it's certainly interesting. We've seen a couple of mid-market clients do like a roadshow with multiple partners, like figure out the partners that work well together and pick regional partners. So if you have 5 partners in each region and you're doing some sort of a customer event, but the partners are there to network and gather the leads and what have you, face to face is totally back. And then we're also seeing some usage of MDF, but it's all proposal based. There is no accrual when you get down to that level. It doesn't make sense. Otherwise, it sits in a bucket and nobody ever uses it. And also teaching the partners to pool their funds. So if all you have to give is $2,000 per partner, there's not a ton you can do for $2,000. But if you can get 5 partners together so that they have $10,000 together, you can definitely get some activities on the calendar that would help move the needle.
So those 5 partners, when they're coming together to run an event, I would assume they're not competitive in nature, or they're
Right.
across the stack putting a solution together.
Correct. Maybe you have one partner who's better at integration. Maybe you have another who's better at customer success. Maybe you have another who's better in that particular market. And I love that there are dogs walking around in your office. If you've got to go back to an office, there better be dogs. And figuring out how those partners work well together. Sometimes it's done by the customer. Like the partners find themselves in the same engagement, much like we did a decade ago. And you learn to what your strengths and weaknesses are and how you can best support each other.
Awesome. So let's shift a little bit to this big thing called marketplaces. And I know you've been to a lot of those events. You're engaged with many of those players. What does marketplace mean for a mid-market company? We understand, like a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar play. They have relationships.
Yeah.
They have sub-markets in those marketplaces. They are like the stores in Amazon, right? So they
Yeah.
can afford to fund those. that dynamic is possibly relatively clear. But again, in coming back to mid market, what does marketplace? Do I just get a listing and forget about that, or who do I go call? Because there's so many people. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, how do I start with a marketplace?
Okay, a couple things. The first is if you're posting yourself on a marketplace, it's not just post it and like hope for the best. It is absolutely as demand gen heavy as a regular demand gen as popping up a website. So you have to enable keywords within your posting. You need to ensure that you have the if this then that. You have to think about which products you're putting in the marketplace and which you're keeping back. If it's a harder sell, it probably shouldn't just be listed in a marketplace. Many of these engagements are happening through private offers anyhow, so it's not like the listing is necessarily driving the revenue. It's getting people there, it's getting brand recognition, but there is marketing that has to happen around the marketplace. And then through these marketplaces, there are your partners are also posting on the marketplace. So figuring out how you don't compete with your partners, but ensure that they have what they need to be successful on the marketplace, but also not detract from your posting or that you're not going head to head. And once you take into account larger consultancies or companies like Ernst and Young and Deloitte, how are they aligned? Which marketplace are they aligned with? And which one do you want to be aligned with? So it's if you're posting on every single marketplace, then you're doing yourself a disservice. You're not putting your energy into one. It's really good to have one and then maybe a second, but post that's secondary. But posting into all three is not ideal. But figure out where the companies that are in your ecosystem that you've done deals with, that you have case studies with, where are they aligning, and try to align in the same direction.
All right, so let me. I think I've started to see a pattern there. So let me see if I can simplify in a framework. So if I'm a mid market, channel pro, I'm being told constantly, I got to co-market, I got to co-sell, I got to co-market, I got to co-sell, and I got a limited budget. So is it fair to say if I have to do a couple of things, not everything? So what I'm saying, hearing from you, if you're going to co-market, pull partners together, put a stack of solutions, and market, co-market through partners, whether it's events, whether it's webinars, whatever social ads,
Yeah.
pull the stack together. But if I'm a transactional piece of, part of the puzzle from an end buyer perspective, make sure you're listed, make sure value props are clear in the marketplaces. Maybe I get listed in market multiple places, but not necessarily shift the dollars to that immediately because I gotta know where I'm at and spend the right way. Is that what I'm kind of hearing?
Exactly. Yes. Yep. Less energy, more efficient, and more effective.
Awesome. All right, so let's go to our favorite topic, Heather, that made you kind of famous, Mr. Bobblehead.
And I'm at my home office today. I don't have the bobblehead.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit of history. Maybe we can borrow your clip and put that in the podcast so people can
Sure
know
thing.
what we were talking about here. What happened there?
So I love promo items. I have a bunch of them in my home office. I have a bunch of them. I don't know when the collection of the promotional items started, but it's been years. Like I have a pen from NetApp from 2009, and probably started before that when I was working in the industry. I got an email that said, we'd love to send you a bobblehead of yourself. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, best day ever. It's a promo item. It's going to be a bobblehead of me. Like, I'm really into sports. This will be great. I know that I already did a TikTok today. This cannot wait. A promo company sent me as a sample as suggestions for things I should send to my clients, or I should have my clients send to their partners or customers. In a lovely box. Thank you. This was the box. A bobblehead of me. Now, I was kind of excited to get this bobblehead. I'm telling all of you right now, do not send people bobbleheads of them. I don't think I'm some crazy, amazing, gorgeous person, but this is not me. That, this, what's this? No, 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 no. Bad idea. This looks like Lady Elaine's drunk niece who can't get a job. Do not send bobbleheads ever. Not okay. For anyone who's over 40, they know Lady Elaine on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. That's what she looked like. So I did it. I'm pretty active on TikTok. I usually post my TikToks to Instagram and LinkedIn. And I did a TikTok on this and it just hit me in the moment. And I was apparently very funny because people were like, you should do stand up. I'm like, it's only when I'm annoyed about something that I'm super funny, apparently.
Did they stop sending you?
Well, so he didn't link, he wasn't on LinkedIn with me. We weren't connected on LinkedIn. So I get an email from him like 4 days later. How did you like your bobblehead? But what ended up happening was, and I highly encourage this, all these other people who sell promotional items sent me gift boxes with like 10 promotional items in them. It was awesome. Like I said, I'm at my home office today, so I don't have any of them, but
All right, now kind of switching gear to you. So you have had an amazing journey, right? And I know we chatted. I have a 17-year-old. She's a senior, breaking into this world of tech. And
yeah,
as we know in tech, the best and the biggest companies have 18% women, right? And maybe the composition changes by different functions.
definitely.
But even in our lead flow, and we can share that data maybe through the podcast, we see how the composition changes as the rank changes and the companies become larger and the gender bias is completely clear. So someone like you who kind of broke through this and have an amazing presence, what are the two or three things when you look back upon that you learned from, maybe you struggled with, and you kind of learn from it and move forward, and advice for other younger women that coming into the
Yeah.
workforce? The next generation is very different, and I see my kid. I'm so proud of her, and I think she'll be very very different from our generation. So thoughts and advice first on your journey, and
Yeah.
then for the next generation.
You know, I had the typical journey of somebody who's almost 50 and was belittled by men and women. I also had this dynamic that we now talk about openly, but it wasn't something that we did, which was the women who were at higher levels than we were looked at me as an entry level marketer in tech and pushed me down, like didn't
Hmm.
give me airtime or said all the things that we claim that men do, all these women were doing. And there are a select few that stopped and said this isn't okay. So Cheryl Cook is someone I admire so much, and you see her reaching down and bringing women up. I didn't have that experience. My experience was with women who said, "Oh, she wants my job. I'm not going to help her." So for most of my early career, it was men that were helping, that were educating me and giving me advice and giving me feedback. Um, and what it's done is now my generation looks at the women who are coming up, and we do reach down and pull up. What I would say to someone in yes, your daughter's generation is totally different and I love it. Like I'm even working with people 5, 6 years out of college and they're much more confident and they ask for what they want. There's a fine line between that and not asking for the education. Like there's still so much you can learn from my generation and those that came before me, that I would say to this group of women, don't let your confidence block you from learning more. Like you do have more to learn. Yes, you can ask for the salary you want. Yes, you can tell them why you're good, but there's 20 years of experience that you don't have yet that you can learn from others. And the other thing I would say is let's not get into a situation where we let history repeat itself. where my generation is reaching down and pulling you up. So then you look at that next generation and you say, wait, I'm not done yet. I need to push them back down. Like we need to just continue to pull each other up, and have the market evolve.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, what happens to Heather and Channel Maven next? What's the game
Yeah.
plan?
I'm super excited. I'm reinventing things a little bit. There'll be a launch in a few weeks, which you'll be one of the first to know. Just doing things a little differently. Like I can't build Channel Maven the way I did 15 years ago because it's 15 years later and we've learned a lot. So I'm super excited. I'm really focused on the channel marketing to partners, demand gen with partners, partner enablement, that sort of consulting. So I'm doing a few fractional channel marketing chief roles and some coaching, which has been really different and just so fulfilling to be able. There are a lot of people out there right now who are questioning what they have done, what they want to do, where their team is, how they get to that next level. So that's been a lot of fun. I realized over the last 15 years, I've probably interviewed over 100 people and have hired just, with people who came and transitioned out and were replaced, probably over 75 people. So it's been a fun 15 years.
Amazing. Well, I would have said good luck, but someone like you create your own luck.
Thank you.
But I would definitely say lots of best wishes. Would love to have you back, Heather. And
Yes,
thank you for
excited
your
for it.
time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.